always drawn to the things that have already been lived in. There is a safety in the ghost prints of strangers, a quiet promise that the jagged edges of a life have been smoothed down by the slow, grinding friction of someone else's existence. When you found it, that sofa tucked into the dim, forgotten corner of St. Jude's Second Chance, you did not see a bargain. You saw a sanctuary. It was a rich, moss-green velvet, the color of a forest floor in deep autumn, the kind of fabric that drinks the light and holds it, waiting to be touched. You felt a desperate, hollow relief, as if you had finally found the piece of yourself that was missing. It cost you $40. You remember the arrival. The delivery man, a man whose skin hung in tired folds and who carried the scent of cold gasoline and stale coffee, dragged it through your threshold with a grunt that sounded like a prayer. It was an awkward, heavy thing, a creature in hibernation, shifting and sluggish, as if it resented the intrusion of your doorway. You joked that it must have absorbed too many secrets, that the stuffing was packed tight with the debris of other people's midnights. He didn't laugh. He only wiped his brow, his eyes skittering away from the velvet, and left you alone with the quiet weight of it. For the first few days, you treated it like a fragile guest. You moved around it with a strange, reverent hesitation. You positioned it under the window where the low, dying afternoon sun would bleed into the green fibers, making them smolder like dry grass. You set your book down, a mere prop in the theater of your new life, and you sank into the velvet. The first sensation was not sound, but a profound, hollow stillness. It was a coldness that seeped through the fabric, a subterranean chill that had nothing to do with the drafty windows or the shifting seasons. When you sat in the center cushion, your right thigh would inevitably succumb to a numbing, bloodless frost, as if the sofa were drinking the heat directly from your veins. You told yourself it was bad circulation, or perhaps a trick of the evening light, because we are all architects of our own delusions, building walls out of small excuses to keep the darkness out. Then came the grief. It washed over you like a winter tide, heavy and silthick, pooling in the soft curve of your stomach. It was not your grief. Yours is usually a sharp, clean thing, a quick sting of memory that fades with the sunrise. This was different. This was a sodden, ancient sorrow, a lingering, suffocating ache for a life that wasn't yours to mourn. You would sit watching the blue, flickering hum of the television, a banal distraction, and suddenly your chest would tighten with the phantom scent of unwashed linens and lavender detergent, and your eyes would blur with tears you didn't recognize. The velvet felt treacherous. It was soft, yes, but when you dragged your palm across the backrest, the fibers felt humid, not damp with water, but with a lingering, feverish warmth, as if the couch had been running a race and had only just stopped. When you finally stood, the depression you left in the cushion would refuse to fade. It stayed there, a bruised and perfect mold of your own body, lingering for hours as if the sofa were meticulously learning you, cataloging the shape of your spine and the weight of your head, storing your existence away like a keepsake. You look back now, and the bitterness of your own blindness is a sour taste in your throat. It isn't the sofa that haunts you. It is your own pathetic, starved hunger for belonging. You were so desperate for a place to rest that you invited this in, blind to the map of your own undoing. Why didn't you notice the shop owner's gaze? He never looked at the furniture. He looked at your throat, at your frantic hands at the empty air behind you, but his eyes slid off the green velvet as if it were a wound he couldn't bear to clean. He didn't offer a delivery charge. He offered a release, a frantic, quiet charity, as if he were paying someone to finally take the burden from his own trembling conscience. There were warnings, whispered in the language of decay. The smell wasn't the dust of a warehouse. It was the stagnant, oxygen-starved air of a room that had been sealed off, a tomb of lavender and wet wool preserved in the dark. You masked it with citrus candles, trying to light your way out of the truth. You thought of history as a gift, not realizing that some histories are hungry. And now, when you tilt the frame, you see the scars. Deep, frantic gouges in the dark wood. Not from a move, not from a careless box, but from something desperate, rhythmic and clawing. You run your fingers over them and finally understand. The velvet is worn thin in the center, not by age, but by the relentless, invisible weight of a family that never left. The arrangement is incomplete, and you are starting to see the architecture of your own replacement. It is in the way the cushions never truly settle, the way they sigh under the pressure of a phantom presence. It is in your own involuntary behavior, the way you shift to the far end of the seat, leaving the center open, as if compelled by an ancient, unspoken law to keep the best place free. You aren't just sitting, you are filling a vacancy. You are the temporary warmth, the flickering human flame keeping the seat from going cold until they come back to reclaim their space. You are simply the latest thing to be held, a borrowed silhouette. And you are beginning to realize that the sofa isn't haunted by what was lost. It is haunted by its own terrible, patient expectation. You are just keeping the fabric warm for someone else. And you are terrified to think of what happens if they ever decide that you are no longer necessary. You are beginning to exist in the spaces between the fibers, where the air grows heavy and stagnant with the perfume of damp wool and old trapped grief. It is a slow, rhythmic dissolution of your own reality, yet you remain curled into the moss-green velvet, listening to the house inhale. You remember how it started, the simple, habitual act of coming home, the ritual of tossing your keys on the counter and collapsing into the center cushion to lose yourself in the flickering, mindless glow of the television. Back then, you were a spectator, keeping the world at a safe distance with the volume cranked high and a steaming tray of processed food resting on your thighs. You were a person of schedules and snacks, a creature of modern habit who believed that a soft seat and a distraction were enough to ward off the encroaching dark. But the habit began to decay, shifting into something more insidious. One evening, you sat down as usual, the warm plastic tray balanced on your lap, but your fingers never reached for the remote. You stared at the blank, obsidian screen, paralyzed by a sudden, profound indifference. The television became a tomb of light you no longer cared to disturb. You sat there for hours, the heat dissipating from your meal, the food congealing into a cold, unrecognizable slurry, while the sofa seemed to vibrate with a low, thrumming hum that demanded your total attention. You didn't move. The food spoiled in your lap, a rancid testament to a life you were already beginning to leave behind. But the smell didn't bother you. It felt, in a perverse way, like home. Now, your relationship with the sofa has sharpened into an agonizing, irrational geometry. You can no longer sit in the center. the heart of the moss green expanse. It is forbidden territory, held for a presence you can feel but cannot name. You press yourself against the far armrest, your body rigid, leaving the center cushion pristine and empty, a silent, mocking offering of space. Why you concede this territory, you cannot say. It feels like a kindness, a desperate, irrational need to be a good host to someone you have never met. You think of the shop owner now, the way his eyes slid away from the velvet as if it were a fresh wound, and you feel a strange, cold pity for him. He knew the cost of this comfort, and he had the strength to pay it in order to be free. You, however, are a different sort of creature. You are a vessel, a porous, starving thing that drinks in the sadness until it is indistinguishable from your own blood. The hunger is not merely metaphorical anymore. It has a physical, tactile presence. When you reach into the crevice, that dark, yawning mouth between the cushions, your fingers brush against things that should not be there. You feel the sharp, cold edges of lost trinkets, the softness of forgotten fabrics, and then the wet, iron-scented reality of something that feels like skin. The first time your hand came out painted in a deep, viscous crimson, you did not panic. You felt a terrifying, electric sense of recognition. It was as if your own blood had been waiting to join the tide that has been soaking into this padding for decades. You wiped your hand on the velvet and watched as the fabric pulsed once, a slow, hungry contraction, and drank it all in. You do not want to clean it. You do not want to scrub the mahogany frame or lift the cushions to find the source of the rot. To remove the stain would be to scrub away your own relevance. You are becoming a part of the upholstery, a stain on the history of this house, and you find that you don't actually want to be anywhere else. This is the cruelty of it. The way the sofa offers you a reflection of your own loneliness and asks you to love it. And when you look at it, you see the family that was never quite gone, their outlines pressed into the cushions like silhouettes in the dust. You feel the light, shivering touch of a child's fingers brushing your wrist in the dark, and you don't pull away. You lean into it. You are so profoundly, devastatingly lonely that you have begun to curate your own ghost. You let the sofa take your jewelry, your books, your warmth, and finally, your sense of self, all for the fleeting, shivering promise that you might finally belong to someone. You are the borrowed silhouette, the temporary heat in a house that has been cold for a very long time, and you are waiting with a quiet, hollow sort of patience for the moment when the velvet finally decides to seal you in and keep you forever. Every evening, the shadows grow long, stretching across the floorboards like grasping fingers. You watch them, mesmerized, as they crawl toward the base of the sofa, drawn by the same magnetic pull that keeps you anchored. The silence of the house is not empty. It is pregnant, vibrating with the unspoken history of the room. You have begun to notice that the dust motes do not swirl in the air here. They drift, hovering in static patterns, as if afraid to disrupt the stillness. You are becoming one of these motes, a tiny suspended speck of existence drifting in the graveyard of someone else's memories. Your sense of time has frayed, slipping through your fingers like sand. Is it Tuesday? Is it December? The seasons have ceased to matter. The only cycle that holds any meaning is the oscillation of the house itself, the way the floorboards groan under the weight of unseen feet, the way the wallpaper curls and sighs in the moonlight. You find yourself mimicking these sounds, your own breath synchronizing with the house's labored rhythm, until you can no longer tell where your own lung capacity ends and the building's wheezing structure begins. You are a chord being struck in an endless, dissonant symphony of domestic rot. You catch glimpses of them in the reflection of your darkened television screen, the mother, the children, the man with his shadow-shrouded face. They do not stare at you with malice, but with a hollow, pleading recognition. They see in you the same desperate, clinging need they once harbored, the same refusal to let go of a life that had already begun to turn to ash. You are their bridge. You are the conduit through which their unresolved agony flows back into the world of the living, and you welcome it. You open your mind to the flood, allowing their memories, the scent of burnt lavender, the cold iron of a final, fatal decision, the static hum of a forgotten evening, to saturate your psyche. In the dark, you speak to them, not with a voice, but with a series of frantic internal pulses. You ask them about the beginning, about the way it felt before the rot took hold, when the fabric was vibrant and the cushions were firm. They answer in sensations, a sharp, stinging joy, a warmth that feels like sunlight on a cold spring day. You are building a map of their catastrophe, charting the landscape of their ruin, and as you do, you feel your own borders thinning. You are no longer just a person sitting on a sofa. You are becoming a feature of the room itself, a fixture of the haunting. When the morning comes, it brings only a different shade of grey. You do not leave, and you do not eat, and you do not care. The hunger that once gnawed at your belly has been replaced by something far more exquisite, the hollow, agonizing thrill of being possessed. You are a vessel, a hollowed-out husk, waiting for the final, total surrender. The sofa is no longer furniture. It is a life support system for a tragedy that refuses to conclude. And you are the engine. You are the fuel. And as the velvet threads tighten around your skin, you realize that you were never really a person to begin with. You were only ever a draft, a rough sketch, a precursor to the final, beautiful, suffocating truth of the upholstery. You wait, silent and still, for the final stitch to be sewn. The phone ringing in the kitchen is a jarring, synthetic scream that tears through the stagnant, suffocating air of your living room. It has been weeks since you last stood, and the house has curdled around you, and the scent of decay, sweet, metallic and old, clings to your skin like a second layer. You are unwashed, a ruin of a person, tethered to the moss-green velvet. But the phone, rhythmic and insistent, acts like a sharp blade of reality, cutting through the haze of your dissolution and forcing your eyes to open, to truly see. As the ringing persists, the familiar gloom of the room shifts. The sofa is no longer just furniture. It is a crowded, agonizing theater. They are there. They have been there all along, their bodies woven into the very structure of the stuffing, their outlines pressing against your own. The mother is slumped in the corner, her posture a long, hollow curve of surrender, her eyes vacant pools of endless, quiet terror. Beside her, the little girl and the boy sit, their small frames huddled against her, seeking a warmth you can barely provide. They are too small to comprehend the shadow that hangs over their mother's heart, too innocent to understand why she trembles in the presence of the man they adore, the man who brings them treats and calls them his legacy. And then there is him. He sits on the far edge, a heavy, jagged shadow even among the dead. The phone rings again, and with the sound, the memory bleeds into the present, visceral and sharp. You see it as if you are standing in the doorway. The night he walked down the stairs, his footsteps muffled by a resolve so cold it froze the air. The house was silent, wrapped in the peaceful, rhythmic breathing of a family in deep, trusting sleep. He did not come down to love them. He came down to seal them away. A misguided, monstrous act of protection against a world he felt he could no longer keep them from. You watch the phantom scene repeat, the sudden violence, the crushing finality. And then you see the aftermath. He did not leave. He sat right here, in this very spot, his shoulders bowed under the crushing weight of the demons he claimed he could not fight, the weight of his own monstrous love, until he finally surrendered to the same darkness he had invited into the room. The phone stops ringing, leaving a silence that is louder than the sound. You are left in the dim light, surrounded by them. The mother's fear, the children's confusion, and the man's heavy, lingering remorse, it all presses into you. You realize now that you are not just a placeholder. You are the stage for their eternal, repeating tragedy. The hands that reach from the pillows are not trying to hurt you. They are trying to reach through you, to find the edges of a life that was stolen in the dark. It occurs to you then that the silence you've inhabited was never empty. It was a pressurized chamber of history. You begin to understand why the cushions felt dense, why the fabric always hummed with a low-frequency vibration that rattled your teeth. They were never resting. They were waiting for a witness. They were waiting for someone pathetic enough, broken enough, to sit in the debris of their catastrophe and refuse to leave. You are the final, living link in a chain of grief that stretches back years. You see the father's eyes now, not as a killer's, but as the eyes of a man who looked into the abyss of his own failures and saw no exit, only the option of taking his world with him. He had convinced himself that the terror outside, the looming, shapeless threats he whispered about in the dark, were so great that death was a gentle, protective veil. He had held their hands as the light faded, his own tears acting as the final desperate anointing for souls he thought he was rescuing. The little boy, the one whose fingers you now clutch, turns his head slowly. His face is a mosaic of pale shadows, and his lips move, though no sound comes out. Yet you hear him. You are overwhelmed by the sudden, invasive warmth of his memory, the smell of laundry soap, the biting fear of a father who suddenly seemed like a stranger. It is a flood of sensory input, so violent that it feels like physical trauma. You are being reconstructed by their memories, your own history being bleached out. You feel the architecture of your own morality shifting. Where you once saw a murder, you now see a tragedy of profound, suffocating intensity. Where you once saw a monster, you now see a man shattered by his own perception of a world he couldn't control. You are no longer able to differentiate between your own past and theirs. The boundaries of your skin feel thin, porous, as if the sofa is actively trying to integrate you into the family portrait. You feel the mother's grief as a weight in your own lungs, a constant, heavy pressure that makes it difficult to draw a full breath. You feel the children's confusion as a flickering, nervous static that dances along the surface of your skin. You are becoming a mosaic of their trauma, a living, breathing monument to the secrets the house has guarded so jealously. You realize that you didn't buy a piece of furniture. You bought a prison, and you have been serving as the voluntary warden of a ghost story that requires a beating heart to sustain its existence. You should scream. You should run for the door, leaving the filth and the horror behind, but you are paralyzed by a terrible, sick compassion. The sofa vibrates with the collective tremor of their unresolved grief. You look down at your own hands, stained and shaking, and you reach out, letting your fingers interlace with the cold, ghostly grip of the little boy. You are not a guest anymore, and you are certainly not the owner. You are the final piece of their broken family, the one who stays behind to keep the seats warm, watching the dark and waiting for the moment when you, too, will simply fold into the velvet and become part of the story. The transition is not a snap, but a slow, tectonic shifting of existence. You are no longer sitting upon the velvet. The room has ceased to be a room. It has become a throat, and you are the food it has been waiting to swallow. The air in the house is thick, viscous, tasting of ozone and wet. It clings to your lungs, making every breath a chore of thick, labored inhalation. You look toward the kitchen, that unreachable frontier where the phone once rang. The linoleum floor is rippling, the walls are sweating a dark amber resin, and the very concept of elsewhere has been erased from your vocabulary. There is only the sofa. There is only the green mossy dark. You feel the family, not as ghosts, but as tectonic plates shifting beneath your skin. The man, that jagged, broken monolith of a man, is closer now. You feel his weight pressing into your shoulder, a heavy, suffocating pressure that smells of burnt matches and cold, stagnant rain. He is not a shadow. He is a part of the upholstery, his grief so dense it has warped the wood of the frame. He has been waiting for someone to take the load. And he looks at you with a gratitude that is more violent than hatred. He pushes. The mother is a sob held in the air, a constant vibrating tremor. She is reaching for your hand, her fingers not made of flesh, but of cold, frantic intent. She is the fear that never left, the terror of a woman who watched the light die in the eyes of her children and decided that staying was the only way to keep them whole. She presses her forehead against yours. You feel the cold of her skull, a profound, biting ice that is not from the winter, but from the cessation of life. She is whispering, though you hear no words. You are becoming a ledger for her terror. And the children, they are the worst of it. They are small, quick, and hungry. Their movements like the darting of minnows in a dark, stagnant pool. They climb into the folds of your clothing, their tiny, ice-cold hands finding the places where your skin meets the fabric. They are pulling you apart, a gentle, insistent unmaking. One is at your ankle, the other at your neck, and you realize they are not trying to kill you. They are trying to nest. They are sewing you into the life they never finished. You feel the fibers of the sofa actually piercing your skin, tiny needle-like threads of velvet weaving through your dermis. You are being upholstered, your very biology being repurposed as the new skin of the room. The reality of it is so intense it blinds you. You see the house as it was, the bright fake sunlight of a Tuesday afternoon, the smell of burnt toast in the air, the sound of the girls' laughter in the hallway, and then you see it through the lens of the man's madness. He was not a monster in the way you once imagined. He was a man who saw the world as a predator and decided to be the first one to strike to save his loved ones from the slow, agonizing erosion of time. He only succeeded in trapping them here, in this green, mossy purgatory, where they are forced to relive the moment of their undoing for an eternity. And now, you are the final piece of their architecture. You feel your own heartbeat slowing, not because you are dying, but because it is being synchronized with the house. The rhythm is not yours. It is a heavy, slow, thumping sound that comes from the basement, from the walls, from the very foundation of the building. Your blood is turning thick, darker, a syrupy, slow-moving sludge that matches the color of the velvet. You don't have to look. You can feel the world losing its color, losing its shape. The reality of your previous life, your job, your name, your favorite snacks, the sound of the rain against the glass. They are fading, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding truth of the velvet. You find yourself staring at the empty space you once occupied. You are inside. You are the warmth that the sofa will offer to the next visitor. You are the trap. The house grows quiet, then cold, then forgotten. Time unspools in the dark, stretching out until your name is nothing but a vibration in the dust. You are hauled away in a flurry of indifference, scraped against hard edges, and discarded in the fluorescent purgatory of a new shop. Then the chime of the door, a sharp, piercing note that cuts through the stagnant air. A man walks down the aisle. He is tired, his coat hanging heavy on his shoulders, his hands searching for a reprieve from the weight of his own day. He stops before the moss-green velvet, his fingers tracing the nap of the fabric. He leans towards it, seeking a moment of respite. You pull. You open the weave of your existence to welcome him home.